So good morning, everybody.
Great.
We'll go ahead and get started. I'm Jay Krishnaswamy at Oregon Health and Science University, and I'm one of the moderators today. I want to bring your attention to the poll within the Whova app. Please go ahead and answer the few questions in the app that are really aimed at understanding everybody in the audience today. You can just answer it as the session goes on. We won't display anything up here. All right, so our learning objectives for the session are listed here. We're lucky, really, to have many global surgery leaders within pediatric surgery, as well as transformative organizations like the Global Initiative for Children's Surgery. So many of you therein have probably already been involved in global surgery and have maybe seamlessly incorporated into your either training or career, but others might just be starting your journey. So hopefully today, what we'll do is stimulate some discussion and knowledge across that spectrum. Most now know the work of the Lancet Commission from 2015. I'm not going to read this other than to say that the lack of adequate surgical care worldwide remains a huge problem, and many more providers and infrastructure are needed. The cost of this is obviously very significant, but it pales in comparison to the loss of global productivity if we don't do this. So with the need to improve surgical care systems to tackle these workforce and material resource deficits, we've seen a shift in the paradigm for HIC contribution to surgical healthcare and LMICs from this, which was a predominant reliance on intermittent short-term volunteerism, towards this, which really shows a strengthening of the education and research pillars for surgical healthcare in developing regions. And that's really in an effort to promote sustainable capacity building by the LMICs themselves. Academia is obviously ideally suited toward this paradigm, and that in turn has opened up many new areas and ways in which individual global surgeon or would-be global surgeon can contribute. I want to acknowledge that there is a role for clinical volunteerism, especially in times of disaster relief. But in this session, at least, we're going to be focusing on academic global surgery engagement. So what's the definition of academic global surgery? Borrowing from the Association of Academic Global Surgery, it's the application of research, education, and evidence-based advocacy towards clinical surgical care in regions of health inequity. The primary goal of the field is infrastructure development with delivery of high-quality surgical care to all, whether that's in high, middle, or low-income countries or urban or rural locations. So development of the field has meant that there's been a propagation of global surgery programs from less than half of all U.S. medical centers 15 years ago having a global surgery program to two-thirds having a global surgery program just 6 years ago, and undoubtedly many more currently. For the individual global surgeon, that's meant that academic pathways and recognition is more widespread for sure, albeit with variable penetrance of kind of institutional support, time allowance, and funding. Academic global surgeons typically balance involvement in one or more of these cardinal areas of academia, just like any other academic surgical discipline, and that could include education of international or domestic trainees, research, whether clinical or health services or quality or basic science, advocacy, like the championing of policy change, and development, be that of clinical programs, surgical systems, or career pathways for global surgeons. The step towards making this an interest into what is an interest into a realistic career are again the same as for any other academic pursuit. First step's getting connected with individuals both within, and I would emphasize, since this is a public health field, those outside of surgery, as well as in many organizations who are focused on or sponsor such activities. Secondly, it's never really too early to develop a focus in one or two cardinal academic areas, something that truly ignites your thoughts and passions, and then sticking with it in one or maybe two places that we work with longitudinally. Armed with that insight, and our own passions, we need to then develop a career plan that outlines objectives and considers whether we need further education with some of the suggestions listed here. I think most of all, certainly at the trainee level, it's important to remember that we will be the most help to others if we become an excellent clinician first. And I think the idea of that is that our big public health ideas are always ultimately rooted in an understanding of the reality of that is being faced by those who are taking direct care of the patients. So once involved in the field, whatever your practice setting is, you generally start out broadly, right? Perhaps getting involved in any project in global surgery that you can, or if you're abroad, purely diving into the clinical realm. With time and to have recognizable impact, we should be becoming more focused in specific subjects. For example, safety or quality or care standardization or optimal education methods, to just name a few. Ultimately, we would choose a specific topic or two within those areas to expound upon. And then simultaneously, at least with regard to kind of investigative work or research within global surgery, and as us individually and as a field, should really show a transition from describing the problems to attempting to fix them. So we started this kind of career path, but how do you really sustain it? And that's what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to hear from our distinguished panelists and all of you in the audience about that. But besides time, money is obviously key to sustainability. Traditionally, large grants had been hard to obtain for global surgery faculty, but that's changed. And there are many people here today, several people here today, who are recipients of NIH or other large governmental grants. And I think it's important to note that especially early on, multiple small or intramural grants or trainee grants may be easier to achieve and worth the effort as well. Showing local relevance of global work and developing parallel projects at home can also help that sustainability. And it also, importantly, I think, promotes the idea that global surgery isn't the other, it's not somewhere else, but it's simply one arm of health equity, regardless of your geography. The more convergent your efforts, as a general rule, for everything you do, the better off everything will be. Finally, we need to leave a trail by developing longitudinal relationships. Clinical, by working and returning to the same place and year after year and developing clinical programs there. Educational, by facilitating lasting bilateral training opportunities. Or research, by promoting bilateral scholarly work and, importantly, leaving a paper trail that others can follow. So I'll leave you with the idea that whatever the motivations for academia's involvement in global surgery are or should be, the goals in the involvement are very straightforward and they're definable. And that is to first build capacity worldwide in order to develop compassionate, cost-effective, quality care across the globe. Two, we should always be helping to develop the next generation of leaders in surgery worldwide. And then finally, academia should serve to advance practice and knowledge in surgery across any geographic and economic boundaries. So with that kind of overview and introduction, I'll have Robin come up, and Robin is going to introduce our panelists. Thank you.
Hey, Jay. Mind if we bring people in just
So as we get started, can everyone lean? If you have an empty chair, please move to the center so that people can move in. If you think you're going to be asking a question,
I'm not used to this.
that's okay. We want everyone to. As we're doing that, making room for all of our friends coming in, again, acknowledging that there are many models in which engaging in global surgery can be done. And there's a lot of expertise in this room, in your colleagues, in connections, whether that is short-term missions, NGOs, disaster relief, education development, clinical capacity, research, if it's grassroots or more on a larger NGO scale. And you can see that a lot of those things that we focus on have some similar terms. What we're going to do today in the panel is we'll have a brief presentation from each of our panelists Then we're going to have some question and answer with the moderators, AKA me, with the four there. Hold your questions. We'll have those at the end to highlight anything. And I anticipate and hope for ongoing discussion. So don't forget our Global Surgery Special Interest Group bright and early at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning and the research session tomorrow. So starting off, our first speaker will be Dr. Mira Kodegal. Mira is an assistant professor and the director of pediatric surgery, global health, and the director of trauma, as well as the director of surgical equity research at Cincinnati Children's. She has a history with the Lancet Commission, as well as really focusing part of her career on health equity and really a strong foundation. And so we're excited to hear how she's incorporated global health. We'll move on to Dr. Brittany Grayson, who's a consultant pediatric surgeon and full-time missionary surgeon in Kijabi, also an assistant professor of surgery at Indiana University. Brittany was stimulated for her really amazing career by her fourth-year rotation as a resident in global surgery. And so she'll talk a little bit about how that works as a model for full-time global surgery. Moving on, the illustrious Dr. Henry Rice is professor of surgery, pediatrics, and global health, and the chief of pediatric surgery at Duke. He works with the Duke Global Health Institute and is the co-director of the Duke Center for Global Surgery and Health Equity. He has a long history in global surgery, as well as engagement in mentoring, research, and sustainable education. We look forward to his insight. To make sure that we also hear, as you've heard from Jay, Dr. Jay Krishnaswamy is a surgeon-in-chief at Dornbecker Children's Hospital, Oregon Health and Science University, and the president of the Association for Academic Global Surgery. Importantly, he wrote the textbook on academic global surgery, so I'll just leave that there. Myself, I'm at the University of Florida and focus quite a bit on collaborative education. Spent a lot of time as a resident in global surgery and transitioning as a career. So we, without further ado, will move on to Mira.
Thank you. I'll try not to hit the button that says ding. Good morning. My goal today is to tell you a little bit about my path and the things that I have considered as I've moved into this career and over the first 5 years in the academic global surgery. So my path started with a degree in political science, actually, from Stanford, and then went on to medical school at Harvard, where I took a year off to work for Partners in Health in Rwanda. And I think this was, for me, a really key experience, both from a mentorship and learning experience, but also really trying to figure out, did I like the work, right? Was the work where I really wanted to spend my time? I went on to complete a general surgery residency at the University of Washington, and during my research years, did a T32 research fellowship in surgical outcomes and worked as a member of the program in global surgery and social change on the Lancet Commission on Global Surgery while getting my MPH. I finished out my residency and then went to Cincinnati Children's for pediatric surgery fellowship and stayed on faculty there after finishing in 2018. Before I talk a little bit about what I've learned and some key things to consider as people move towards a career in global surgery, I want to take a moment to honor two giants that we lost in the past year who massively impacted my career and my life. The first is Dr. Paul Farmer, who many in this room probably know or know of. I first met Paul in 2002, and he was my mentor and life guide and adopted parent over the subsequent 20 years. His death left a hole in the hearts of many, but he was one of the first vocal advocates for global surgery, calling surgery the neglected stepchild of global public health. Dr. Martin Satuma was my partner in Uganda and passed away last year at the age of 46, leaving behind 6 children from an eminently treatable illness, which is a reminder to all of us of the inequities that exist in our world. I miss them both tremendously, and I'm grateful for the wisdom and the spirit of generosity that they taught me and showed me, and all the things that I learned from them, which have impacted why I do what I do today. One of the things I think to think about, and I just have a couple of slides that I think key questions to throw out there, and then we'll have a broader discussion as a group. I think the first thing to really consider is, where do you want to work? Who are your local partners? We talk a lot about the importance of doing this work in partnership and in solidarity with the communities we serve. And so my work has taken me to Uganda, and primarily to the western part of Uganda in Imbarara, where Martin, who's on the far right of your screen, was based for many years. I work closely with Dr. Drew Goskades, who many know, as well as Dr. John Sekabira, and now Felix Oyania, who was Martin's fellow, who's now taken over the practice in Imbarara. And those partnerships are absolutely key to the work that I do. I work in service of Felix and John and our many partners in Uganda and what they want and need for their communities. I think the second question is, what are you going to focus on? What do your local partners need and want? We often show up to work with things that we want to fix. And when I first started going to Uganda, Martin and I had lots of conversations about trauma, because one of the things that I do is trauma, and it's obviously the leading cause of death for kids. And so it was really an interest of mine. But one of Martin's key priorities was really thinking about fellow training and management and bowel management and colorectal. Those were his dreams. Those were the things that he believed were the most important for us to be working on. And so that was where we started. Our focus was on what was important to him and to his community. And now, 5 years later, we're starting to think a little bit about trauma, but we just did our first bowel management, which our excellent fellow, Stephen Trinidad, will be presenting tomorrow in the research symposium. I think in negotiating a job, some of the things to think about are, how are you funded? What does that look like? And those include both your time that you spend on global surgery and on global surgical research, as well as your travel, your in-country costs, and things like IRBs, programmatic system development, and even just physical resources. When we did bowel management, I took 20 Foley catheters with us to be able to do enemas, because those were things that we couldn't find and source locally. So how are you going to pay for those things in a way that allows you to some degree, some of us pull money out of our pockets to do that, but what's the sustainable route for funding that work? I think and Robin alluded to this, as did Jay, that like a lot of, for many of us, this work, thinking about global surgery, has long been rooted in just a global understanding of health equity. And so recognizing that this is a part, working in Africa, for me, is a part of my health equity work, but it is not all of my work. The silver lining of the pandemic, I started my career in 2018. In 2020, we went into a global pandemic, and for 2 years, I didn't travel. And so the silver lining of that was that it allowed me to expand my focus and my expertise in the health equity space, and really thinking about the problems that live in the community around me in Cincinnati, in addition to the work that we do. And those are, I believe, two sides of the same coin, and really a focus on health equity. And it's allowed me to do both in ways that I think naturally fit together and synergize and build upon each other. I think you have to think about how you're going to manage call. If you're an academic surgeon and you work in a practice, there's call. And so how do you manage call? In my practice, I take a full call load when I'm in country. So when I'm in the United States, I take a full call load. When I'm not, my partners are kind and gracious and acknowledge that I am not in Uganda on vacation. I am in Uganda doing work, and work that is of importance to our practice. And so I don't have to take 12 months of call in 9 months. I take 9 months of call in 9 months. And I think that's a really important point, in part because it was a validation of that work. It was a reflection that this was legitimate work and a legitimate academic career, and not time that was spent like having a blast in sub-Saharan Africa. It also allowed me to then spend my time in the United States when I was not on call, working towards research and working towards a K that was recently just funded.
Super.
So I think the next question is, what are your metrics of success? Research can be slower and more challenging in resource-limited settings, and not always the focus of the local team, quite understandably. So how do you measure success? And I think Dr. Rice will also talk to this a little bit. Like, if you're a division director, what does it look like to deem that somebody who has a career in global surgery is successful, and how do you work towards metrics of promotion? So what I've learned in the last 5 years, things change. A year and a half into my time as an attending, as I mentioned, we entered a global pandemic. I did not travel for 2 years, and I had to be flexible and pivot on my focus just as I was starting. So thinking about how I could connect with our team in Uganda virtually, and we do that over Zoom every week. We have education sessions with them. I meet with our fellows regularly to talk about cases. I dug into my local equity work, which for me was really rewarding, and it allowed me to feel like I was doing both pieces of the work and not ignoring one in service of the other. I think I've discovered that the challenge of having funds to support this work is not always the same as using those funds. And so I work for an institution that has many, many advantages, but one of them is not figuring out how to take money and use it overseas. And so being able to figure out how you use that money to pay for an IRB or to fund a research stipend for a resident or a medical student or a fellow in Uganda has been quite challenging, and something I've had to learn a lot about. And then I think the balance of this work, if you really want to be kind of a foot in both worlds, is figuring out how do you balance the time that you're away and the engagement in the local team versus the time that you're home. And for me, that has been a challenge. But I do find that as I've built deeper and deeper relationships, I go back to the same place, I talk to the same people, that has gotten easier. I have Sunday mornings, I get on Zoom with our fellows and with Felix in Western Uganda and talk about their cases for the week and talk about pre-op planning and how they might think about surgical approach. And that has allowed me to continue to invest and do education with them, but still be here doing my job here. So I think those are the biggest things that I think I've learned and focused on over the last 5 years. And as we discuss, I'm sure there'll be lots of other nuggets to share. That's it for me.
If there's an open seat next to you,
There's
maybe you
a few
can move
seats right
over
here.
and people just start coming in so that we have room for everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming. It's an honor to talk to you guys today about my path to global pediatric surgery. And there really is a button on this that says danger, so no pressure. The American Christian missionary path to global service is nearly 200 years old, with the first American missionary doctor sent to China in 1835. Today, there are nearly 1,000 American physicians serving full-time abroad. Medical missionaries like my husband and I were and are funded by churches, as well as individual donations from friends, family, and colleagues. My husband and I sold everything we own and moved to Kenya in August of 2020, in the middle of that pandemic, motivated really by our Christian faith in God to serve abroad full-time. Being full-time missionaries is essentially that. It's giving up a home in the U.S. and living abroad for a number of years. Our mission agency does 3-year terms, followed by a stateside assignment before returning for another 3 years. Different organizations do that differently. We're currently in the middle of our first stateside assignment, which is 6 months in the U.S., during which we are connecting with supporters, fundraising, doing professional development like this, and as well as spending some intentional time debriefing and caring for our mental health. We returned to Kenya for our second 3-year term in July. So I don't make a 6-figure salary, but to do this work actually costs quite a bit more than you might think. So this is a snapshot of our actual finances. We raise roughly $100,000 per year, and only 40% of that is our salary, so $40,000 a year. We raise every penny required for administration fees, taxes, health insurance, CMEs, even the money it took to attend this conference. Most of our support comes in the form of recurring monthly and annual donations from individuals, but we also have the support of our sending church, which is Brentwood Baptist in Nashville. I wanted to talk a little bit about how I found my job. And I'll echo a message that you've already heard from Dr. Kodagal, which is the first question should always be, what does the global partner need? In my case, I had rotated in Kajabe Hospital in 2015 as a 4th-year surgery resident at Vanderbilt. So I kind of already knew the answer. They were looking for a full-time surgeon to come and train and teach in their program. So I was pursuing that through World Medical Mission, which is a branch of Samaritan's Purse initially, and also through the Pan-African Academy of Christian Surgeons. Now I work with an organization called Bethany Kids that not only funds our training program, but also works with the graduates of our program in 7 different countries across the continent. For those of you who are not interested in faith-based work necessarily, Kids OR is another place to connect with and be able to find a partnership potentially to work abroad. They have expanded their training efforts, so starting with just supplying operating rooms and now also funding training programs across Africa and branching out into Central and South America even now. I want to just say one thing, and I highlighted this on my paper. So the most important person, I can't forget to say this, the most important person in any work that you're doing outside of your home country is the local surgeon. And if you don't have a local surgeon, I will strongly argue that you shouldn't be there. Especially nowadays, there are, and I guess disaster relief is going to be the exception to that. But if you're going to do what I do and live and work full time, we need to be committed to building local capacity and to putting ourselves out of a job. Okay, another word about my job. So I maintain a faculty appointment at Indiana University where I trained for my fellowship. We were able to do this because I worked full-time for 6 months right after I graduated. So I was initially credentialed as a full-time employee, and when I moved to Kenya, we were able to drop that down to a 0.01 FTE. Everyone always laughs, but it is the best deal. So I stay credentialed year-round. I have malpractice insurance coverage with no lapse. I'll talk more about that in a minute. I maintain digital library access, which is supremely helpful, and I'm promotion eligible on a clinical track, so my academic career isn't stagnant just because I choose to work in a different country. Maintaining malpractice insurance without a lapse is especially protective for me at the point in which I do decide to come back and work in the US, where it can be very difficult to get a job if you haven't been covered for a while. It's important to note that I don't necessarily add monetary value to my department. I work back in the US about 2 weeks a year taking doc of the day call, and if I weren't billing those doc of the day RVUs, someone else would be. So with incredible thanks to Fred Rescorla and Alan Ladd, who are here in the room, my former and current chairs, the IU Pediatric Surgeon Group has chosen to partner with me because they believe in the work that I'm doing. My residency program director, John Tarpley, would say that they're paid in non-taxable income, right? So they're paid by being a part of the direct clinical work I'm doing, caring for the children in Kenya, but also in terms of being a part of the work that all of our graduates are doing across the continent. We have collaborative case conferences, and even right now we're working on our application to the RRC for a fellow-level pediatric surgery rotation with me in Kenya. It takes a lot to maintain these jobs, so I wanted to address that as well. I maintain my Indiana medical license as well as my American Board of Surgery certifications. In addition, I have a Kenyan medical license and sat for the exams of my local Board of Surgery, which is the College of Surgeons of East Central and Southern Africa, or COSEXA. I could have made a phone call and been nominated in by election, but it was important to me to sit for the exams for 2 reasons. First was out of respect for the system, to prove that I have what it takes to be a board-certified surgeon in that part of the world when measured on their scale. And second was that my trainees take this exam, and none of us ever teach an exam, but our trainees have to pass them. So what better way to know that exam than to feel the pressure myself? Finally, my work permit in Kenya actually requires me to submit the documents of the Kenyan whom I'm training to be a pediatric surgeon. I think this is awesome. I think it's going to be the way of the future in terms of expats working in low and middle income countries, and it keeps us honest to building local capacity because it's not about me. These are my partners in Kenya, Ken Muma and Jason Axt. Ken is a graduate of our program. Jason was a Vandy General Surgery graduate with me, so it's fun to reconnect over there. We share an office. But together, we do about 1,000 cases a year. Now, for a lot of years in Kajabi, that same volume was done by 2 surgeons. And when I came, we became a 3-surgeon group for the first time. The real difference has been our ability to do research because we each have a little, like 1 extra day a week that we can devote to that. And we can teach our residents how to ask and answer good questions. Our training program is most similar to an integrated residency where our trainees apply after medical school and then do 2 years in general surgery and 4 years in pediatric surgery. This map in the top right shows our current trainees and graduates. So right now we have 9 trainees in 6 levels of the program. They represent 6 different countries. Our trainees and graduates, as well as their home countries, are highlighted here. As mentioned earlier, Bethany Kids funds a significant portion of their training and also salary support, needy patient funds for our graduates once they go out into practice, so they don't feel like they're just out there on their own. We've got a table across from the registration booth and are also hosting a breakfast tomorrow morning in Poinciana AB at 6 a.m. We'd love to see you there. You can follow my mission work on social media at Kenya Operate. I tweet all the time, as you probably know. And I just want to thank APSA, Jay, and Robin for this opportunity. Thank you.
Don't be shy. You guys can come in and sit right up in the
Yeah.
front. There are some seats here.
3 seats here.
I was just going to say, please come on in. There's a few places here. It is, while we're just, people are coming out, I just want to say a few words of observation. It is tremendous that there is so much interest in this room. I am floored by this. And you know what I really like is all the young faces. This is the future, and it is inspiring to see you all here. While people are settling down, I'm Henry Rice, and Jay and Robin asked me to speak a little bit on the other side, realizing that many of you are wondering, can I do this in a career? And if so, how do I do it? And what's the challenges and all this? And I just want to give a little insight from the other side of it. Not that this is adversarial. In fact, if there's any message you take, this is a team sport. And from a division chief and department chair, and I'll sort of amplify a lot of the messages that Jay and Robin alluded to, this is very much becoming part of the mainstream. The other point I want to make is while we're doing this, we are all influenced by mentors, right? That's how you got into this job in the first place. And I want to acknowledge that you don't have to look any further than this platform to look at Jay and Robin and others, and you can do this as part of your career. I see Georges in the back. I see Ben. I see people who have integrated some global work in some way, shape, or form and become very successful academicians and leaders in the field. So there are more and more. There are recent past presidents of ABSA. It can be done. So take heart now. How the heck are you going to do it? All right, am I going to explode? Here we go. A few thoughts. What is the rationale? Why in God's name would a department or division think that they should fund this and support this? And Jay mentioned this a little bit. But the first I want to emphasize is that there is a growing recognition across the academic community that health equity studies, that global health work in all sorts of domains is a valid academic discipline. It has a language of its own. It has a quality of its own. It has ways to evaluate on its own. And if that's what you want to do with your career, you have to learn that language, and you have to sort of go through the same academic practices that you would do for any. But similar to all the other sessions at ABSA that you're going to see about this science and that science, this global health, global surgery, and health equity is on par with all of this. And I think we need to recognize that. And division chairs and hospital leaders and professional society leaders do recognize that. I want you to know that. The goals, and Brittany mentioned this a little bit, of the basis of global health work, the spirit of accompaniment, the science of how you build partnerships, they are very much aligned with how health systems operate, with how divisions operate, with how departments operate, and that's how you reach out to your local community. So the same practices, the same languages, the same values are going to be closely aligned. So when division chairs and division chiefs, I see maybe some here wondering, should I fund this? Should I do this? I would argue that it is as worthy of investment as is any science that we do in pediatric surgery. And if we want to advance the field, we recognize that it takes investment. And that's why we support people like Brittany and Mira and things of that sort. All right. There are opportunities. There are lots of ways. And you've just heard a few ways that people in some fashion integrate global health work into their practices. But there's lots of other ways to do it. I think from a division chief, from a division chair, what I would emphasize is that whatever you do, it should be high quality if you want to stay within an academic enterprise. And there are different ways you do that depending on what your science is. But if you're going to do a research bend, if you will, which is where I spend most of my work, it has to be high quality. If you're going to do educational programs, it can't be itinerant teaching. It has to be things that Brittany does, where you're invested in long-term commitments and things that are going to take it through. There are lots of ways you can do it. One doesn't need to be out of the country to be a partner. You can accompany people from afar. And so I think Amir mentioned this. A lot of what she does is while she's on site. So the issues about call, pay, things of that sort, it is part of your academic activities year long. I teach a course every year in partnership with a university in Rwanda called the University of Global Health Equity. And we do this on a shared basis. So we're planning throughout the year. We're kind of doing this. We're getting lectures going. We give the course during the year. But I don't have to be on site to do this, so it doesn't raise all those challenges. So there's lots of different ways that one can do this. And finally, and Jay alluded to this a little bit, there's lots of ways to get money in this. And that, as division chiefs, as department chairs, a lot of these are financial decisions, but there are an increasing number of grant opportunities, both at the NIH and more at external agencies, Gates Foundation and a number of external foundations. And one simply does high quality work, and you will be as competitive for that as you will with any other science that we do in pediatric surgery. All right, last slide. Yeah, there are a few challenges, but you know what? Challenges are opportunities too. And we learn from this, and you should embrace these. It some ways, always a question of dollars and question of money. And that's okay. That's what we invest in sciences for. And so you work with your division leadership and your department leadership to develop a plan during your contracting stage, during your early faculty stage, as you develop your mentorship plan, to make sure you're going to be as likely a success as you can be in that. The metrics for success, I think Jay mentioned this, it's different in the global health space. I also sit on our promotions committee, and a lot of the metrics in the global health space kind of resonate with me what the metrics are in the education space when you see people lead education programs there, and that there may not be a tremendous number of laboratory-based studies where you're going to be the senior or the first author, because in the global health space, your mentors are the senior or your mentees, I should say, are the senior and the first authors. But promotion committees recognize that. And you should be comfortable with that. In fact, you should be applauded for it. And I just want to tell you from the other side is that you will be applauded for it at most institutions. I can't, obviously, none of this is universal, but these are more common practices than they are isolated to one institution or another. And finally, like any academic exercise, you have to balance people's time, call schedules, commitments with every other investment that you do. So if you're going to, for a division chief or a department chair, if you're going to support 4, 6, 8 faculty, and they all have different levels of academic and non-academic work, right? That's always a balance. And that's how you integrate all of this into your call schedule and the such. And I would argue that global surgery work or health equity work is no different than anything else that we invest and protect people's times. All right, I'm going to stop there so we leave it for questions. Thank y'all.
Thank you guys very much. I think that our panel did an excellent job of answering about half of my questions, which is fantastic because we did want to touch on a few themes. You guys mentioned having protected time, and I just want to clarify, is that protected time in your contract? How is that spelled out, and how much time do you need, and has that changed over time to be successful in this space?
So it was spelled out in my contract, and my initial protected time was at 50%, and that was including research work as well as global surgery. I then went into a pandemic and I wasn't traveling, and so I actually went back up to a full call load because it didn't make sense for me to be at halftime if I wasn't traveling. But I do have protected time in that sense, and I would say probably now I'm more like 60-40 than 50-50.
Jay and Henry, do you have comments when you're...
Well, yeah, I guess I would say, I would amplify that. I'd say we protect people's time all the time, and I hate to kind of keep saying the same message over, but repetition kind of means you'll get it at some point. But we protect everybody's time that we invest in who has an academic career, right? If somebody wants to go to the lab and develop a artificial placenta or something like that, we make sure they get 20-30% of their time free. So there's nothing different about protecting people's time. What is simply different are the logistics of how you're going to balance it in making a call schedule and things like that.
And I think that that's where the career plan as you're starting out is critical, because if it's a place that's never really done that, they need to understand and be put in their language as to what you're going to do with this time, all right? Because depending on what you're going to do, your time commitment's going to potentially vary.
Along with having that and doing that initial contract negotiation, why is it important to have in your contract versus a verbal, oh yeah, you can have that time, to have that job description? Are there benefits, leading question, to having that in your contract?
Mary, you were through this more recently.
I think yes, for sure. I think some of it is about the clarity that you're actually going to be given the time that is expected of you, and that it's not a wishy-washy like, oh, hey, we'll find some time somewhere for you. I think it provides legitimacy, like I mentioned, to the fact that this is a real actual focus and area of work. And then I know Robin and I were talking about this, and Robin, maybe you can expand on this more because I know you've had these conversations around malpractice coverage and other things, right? If I am doing this work in Uganda, like under the support of Cincinnati Children's, they will cover travel insurance, they'll cover medical evacuation insurance, they'll cover malpractice insurance. All those pieces are covered by the institution for that time that I spend abroad because it is work in service of the organization.
The only thing I would add to this is that the magic words when you're negotiating a contract and you're doing your first 3 years of that are grants, right? So if you are using your time in your first few years, and Mayor getting a K award is a perfect example of this. All of a sudden, from the other side, you cut a lot of slack, and the numbers are a little less important. So, not that you have to do a grant or a K award or something like that, but the point is that use that time early on when you're developing and you're working out your earlier mentorship to develop a niche that is high quality and respected and has academic metrics. And if you're successful, it becomes less relevant a year or two into it. It really does.
Yeah, I just want to amplify a couple of words that you've heard a couple of times. That being high quality, justification, right, for what you are doing as a valuable employee, which gets down a little bit to when you're doing those contract negotiations and that, how do you balance your vocation or your passion or your mission to get to do what you want and what you're passionate about with being a role model for those coming after in terms of negotiations?
I would just add on that note, don't be afraid to ask for what you want. So, I mean, this job, combination of jobs that I have, I don't know that anybody else has ever done it. And Fred Riscroll and I kind of came up with it on the fly. So, I asked him, I said, I want to work for 6 months. I'd love to partner after that, but I feel like making the transition to faculty in the US will benefit me as opposed to just moving to another country and all of a sudden being the attending or consultant surgeon. And, he went to the group and said, how can we make this happen? And they were all willing to participate. And so, but if I had never asked, if I just assumed the answer was no, I wouldn't have this, right? So I think don't be afraid to ask for what you want and then get it in writing.
I also think, and Jay was a key part of this for me, along with Daruk and others, was that, they talked to my division director, sought opinions of others to say, I want to support somebody to be successful in this. What does that take? What does that look like? What does she need to be able to thrive? And Jay was a part of that, and Drew Gosgades and others who sort of gave advice like, okay, you need X amount of time, or you need that sort of protected space, or this is how much, it costs to do this work. I think the other thing that I think is really important in that metrics of success, and part of why the contract piece is important, it takes longer for this to sort of take off, right? I'm entering my 6th year, and it just now feels like I have momentum. And I think recognizing that work is it's a slower burn, but it's still really valuable, and setting your metrics of success around that expectation.
Yeah, and I think just to echo all that's been said, this entire conversation is completely unheard of 10 years ago, even 5 years ago to some extent. And so the landscape is changing so much that it's important that we keep up with that by holding ourselves to what are kind of the traditional, metrics of academia, if for no other reason than to translate this work, into what everyone else understands. And that, again, I'll say again, starts with the career plan.
So with those metrics, when your discussion, let's use a language a division chief may, what's the return on investment by hiring and having someone engage in global surgery, particularly when that is protected time and potentially protected time away?
I feel a little put on the spot. I think the return on investment is really rich, and it's not in dollars. It's in sort of the issues of branding and values and engagement and outreach. And we live in a global world where everybody's on social media these days. And if your program, your hospital is leading in the health equity space and doing novel, innovative work, be it locally or globally, that is of tremendous value in of itself, and it pays itself off in spades. It really does. And I hear that again and again from my department chair, and I know that's a common sentiment across most academic departments. Not all. This is not rosy everywhere. I know some of you are thinking, my institution would never let us do this. I think that, as Jay mentioned, that is less and less year by year, and I would amplify that you are your ROI, if you will, is not in dollars. It's in satisfying your core missions of your institution, and you should be proud of that.
I'll just build on that to say, I think there's two things. First of all, we always have, as multiple people have mentioned, we have to remember that while we're supporting this and supporting our career, what is the return on investment for our partners? And so keeping that in mind is always important. But, and so that, the way we achieve that may be a little different, but, it doesn't have to be divergent from the return on investment for your home institution. So for example, just like simple things. Finally, the way that I got our institution many years back interested in it is I showed that I could do the exact same operations, or I was doing the same operation, or helping others do the same operations elsewhere for a fraction of the cost. So then all of a sudden, you get put in charge of, more work, but performance improvement for your area, and then you're saving the institution money because you're a global surgeon, because you're constantly innovating and thinking about how to do something different. So there are many, many different ways of showing return on investment. And frankly, I think, other than those traditional ways, I don't think global surgeons are really that good at demonstrating widely the return on investment that we bring, and we have to get better at that, but there are many ways to do it.
I think the innovating part is a huge part of it, right? We learn just as much as we go and we teach, we learn. And we bring back things that we learn into our communities. I find that when I come back, my approach to how I take care of patients and how I operate, like all of those things is slightly different because of the context of working in a place that's so resource constricted. I think the other piece that I would say is that when I applied for general surgery residency, everybody looked at me like I had 12 heads, right? Which I think was true for many of us. But now, right, 87, 90%, I don't know, some vastly high number of folks who come through for general surgery training or for the pediatric surgery fellowship match are interested in global health. And so as an organization, to have people who are able to teach and train and mentor others in this space, I think is also a value add for your organization.
Jay, I tie my own endo loops and reuse trocars, so I think I do the cheapest appendectomy of anyone at this meeting.
I'm going to two questions, then we're going to open it up to the field. And we're going to kind of bookend our audience a little bit. So I'm going to ask them both for some answers there. The first is, Mira, you mentioned all of this interest in students and residents and trainees. And I am sure that you get a lot of emails every day from said students and undergraduates and high school students and everything we talk about. How do you handle all of the students and all of that pipeline coming behind that's looking for mentorship? And then on the converse side, is there a role for, if we look at the surgical life cycle, for retirees or late stage surgeons to engage in this field?
So I would answer to the second question, yes, but I'm going to leave it as yes, because I don't know how to say more on that. I think the first question is for sure, I think, one of the great challenges. And it is a great opportunity and a privilege, but it is also challenging. I think I probably get one email a day from somebody who is interested in thinking about this field and thinking about how they move forward in this space. And I am absolutely a product of the mentorship that I received. And so I take that responsibility and opportunity, I think, very seriously. But it is challenging because where are the hours in the day to do all the mentoring that you want to do? So I tend to say for myself, I'm willing to have a conversation with anybody who reaches out to me and asks to do that. If people want more longitudinal, more intentional, more sort of long-term mentoring, then I think figuring out what the real specific goals are for that, and then figuring out where I have time, or recognizing that there are others who I know or partners that I have or others who might be interested in serving that role. And then, like all things with mentorship, it's a two-way street. So I seek, and I'm better at mentoring people who invest effort in being mentored.
I'll just add that I think many of the people who might be reaching out to us or to any of us, they're not necessarily pediatric surgeons, right? Or they don't necessarily want to be. They just know you're globally involved. Although pediatric surgery global surgery is a small field, and global surgery as a whole still is. There are many, many other people who are involved in this space, and I get around that a fair amount by now. Feels a little bit bad compared to what I used to be able to do, but I farm people out. I say, hey, I know people who are excellent at this and will fit up perfectly with you, and they may not be at this institution, they may be at some other institution. And I think that's the importance of getting that pipeline, because as we have more of a corpus of people who do global surgery, there's more people who can serve as mentors.
And with respect to the later career or retired surgeons, so I mentioned, but through Bethany Kids, we have a number of graduate surgeons who are still the only pediatric surgeon in their hospital. And there's at least 2 that I can think of off the top of my head who are the only pediatric surgeon in their country. And they would love for someone to come and visit them, especially to come back, multiple times, 2 times a year, something like that. So there's definitely a role for that.
Awesome. So we'll take the time to open it up for questions.
So Brendan Campbell, Hartford, thanks for a great panel. This may be the best panel I've been to so far at APSA this year. So thank you guys very much.
You say that to everyone.
So just a little background. I've been going to Haiti, the same hospital in a town called Milo, for about a decade up to the pandemic. And I wish I'd had this panel when I was starting out. It would have made things easier. But a couple of comments, just since I see so many young faces in the audience. I think it's great to have something in your contract and a plan when you're doing this, but you don't have to make this part of your academic focus, and I certainly haven't done that. But just 2 of the hidden benefits that I've found in doing this are, 1, you become a better surgeon by having to do what you do as a pediatric surgeon in an environment where you have so much less. And the valuable relationships I've developed with Haitian surgeons has really been remarkable. And then the other thing, which I haven't heard mentioned yet, but I think is real, is I think it's almost a prophylaxis against burnout. Because what I find is every time when I come back from Haiti, I find that the things that bothered me before I went become a lot less significant. So I think
Absolutely.
it's very rewarding. So thank you guys for a great panel. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
I totally agree, Brendan. I find that Ugandan Mira is way more patient than Cincinnati Mira. And when I come back, like you sit, right, you're in settings and you sit for 3 hours waiting for the, anesthesia machine to start or whatever it is that might happen, or, oh, we don't have blood, or, okay, yeah, I got a hole in the aorta and there's no suction, right? All those things that you learn how to kind of manage, I think you do translate those back. And when I come back, I'm a much nicer person for at least a while.
Hi, Marjorie Odegaard. I'm a current research resident at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. So when I was taking a class actually from Paul Farmer in college, one thing I learned was that the goal of any global health workers should be to work themselves out of a job. And I'm also from a country that is the target of a lot of these efforts. And so I'm wondering how you all sort of went about working with places or programs that you felt were up to par with your ethics and really sort of helping to train so that you, as much as you like being there, in the long term, don't need to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think a couple of the organizations I mentioned, Bethany Kids and also Kids OR, are incredible partners who are like investing longitudinally in training programs. And so I think that's really the key, is finding a place with a training program. And there are also, as I mentioned, ways to support people who are so far away from a training program. And that work is really important too. So, I think we can be so focused on building local capacity that sometimes we ignore like the short-term relief work that can be really helpful. I think both of those are important.
I think that's a great point and super important point, right? Which is, on some level, I always think of it as you have to have some kind of an exit strategy before you even enter the relationship. But the exit strategy doesn't have to be, I'm leaving them, because that can be its own ethical problem, right? But that's the beautiful thing about an academic relationship. It just evolves, right? They might need clinical help. They might need educational help. They might need investigative help. It kind of never ends. It's just like how we help each other in this country. So I think it's important to think about that and always checking back in with the partner to say, is this working? And you'll be surprised. Like, I've worked with one of my partners for a long, long time, is here in the audience, and we've had conversations over 18 years, and all of a sudden I realized I've done the wrong thing for the last, year. So.
I think it's an amazing question, and I think Paul would be very proud of you for asking that question. So I want to acknowledge that. I also want to say that one of Paul's least favorite words was the word sustainable, because he believed that we used it as an excuse to justify walking away from communities in poverty. And so I think, yes, we want to work ourselves out of a job. Yes, we want to do health system strengthening and build capacity. But the other side of that coin is accompaniment and solidarity, and recognizing that our job is not to walk in front of our partners or behind them, but beside them. And to continue to be in that role. And I think checking in, and that's why local partners are so important, so that the work that you show up to do is the work that serves the community that you're taking care of. But I think making sure we don't also sort of confuse that with, as Jay was saying, an opportunity to walk away. Because if we make ourselves feel better, right? But at the end of the day, that's not really the goal. And sustainability can be used as a justification for abandoning communities too.
I think to amplify, and summarize some of what's been said with that, and for an excellent question, partnership, there's less of a power differential, right? And if that focus that you've heard everyone have on the fundamentals of health equity and the role of poverty in healthcare, whether you're local or global, building relationships doesn't mean, right, it's ongoing, it's evolving. And I think that people really focus on is key, not what's my mission to do and leave, but what that, and which is the same, right? Surgery is a team sport. Training and engaging, and it's a team sport with people that are your colleagues, that are your friends, and that makes it very exciting, but also very similar to what we do here and how you function. And so it makes it relative for people that don't necessarily understand it.
Mm-hmm. Great questions.
Thank you.
Hello, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I am the local one. My name is Fernanda Lage. And since 2005, so it's been 18 years, I am the only pediatric surgeon in a small state at Amazonia. Mm-hmm. It's called Acre in Brazil. It's frontier with Peru and Bolivia, and I am the only one practicing there. Mm-hmm. In 2018, I was awarded by American College of Surgeons with Community Surgeon Travel Award. I had the opportunity to attend my first American meeting, and it was life-changing for me. And that's when I heard about global surgery, and that's when I figured out what I was doing. I am from Rio. I'm not from there, but it's my mission in life, and I'm really, really happy to be there and so rewarded by all that I have achieved by myself. But I cannot work by myself. I'm here at APSA today to look for a partner, so if you want to be there, and I can receive fellows, I can receive residents and students. I am a professor at the university for more than 12 years. We have a public medical school. Now we are in our 22 graduate class. We have a program of general surgery residents. And it's so important to have your help,
Absolutely.
I was lost in the middle of the jungle. It's frightened me because it's just like I cannot handle with all that alone. Yeah. But I have applied for the grant, and the colorectal and the bowel management is our main problem. I think that it's the one that we can solve with low budget, and we can do a lot of things with low budget. I feel myself just like a MacGyver. So with a syringe and a silk tape, I'm able to adapt a lot of instruments. I'm able to do esophageal. I have made 70 esophageal atresia, and I have a huge number of patients, and I have a mortality of about 30%, most due to sepsis and to other malformations. And it's a pleasure to be here. I hope to make relations with you and to be part of that.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And
congratulations.
I have one big question. that's how you organize something like that, because I know that funding and money, it's a problem, but now we are getting more and more grants. That's what I'm looking for. But it's not only the money. How to handle that? We have corrupt government. So I cannot, we have a public health system, so it's all for free from anyone. So it's easy, but I cannot put that money in their hands. So we need also someone to organize the initiative and to organize the work and how to handle with that. That's my biggest question.
I can take a stab at that. You just laid out a whole argument why people need to learn this language, right? None of these problems are simple. And it's probably far more than we have time to get into right here. But I would call this meeting a success if you found somebody who could work with you and help you with your human resource limitation. But all the other problems are challenging. I will say, just in terms of operational, I think Jay mentioned this real quick, and I don't see Daruk or anybody here, but the Global Initiative for Children's Surgery has a number of resources about ways to... What's that?
Sabina's here.
Oh, Sabina's right here. Talk to Sabina. She'll get you. But there's a number of resources available in terms of training, human resource support, all sorts of problem-solving mode. And that is the language they speak. So you don't mind, Sabina, helping?
There's,
Thank you for all the work you do.
it's wonderful. It is 11:15, so our time is up. We're going to honor the last two questions here. This has stimulated a lot of conversation. Find any of us, talk amongst yourselves afterwards. Come to the special interest group tomorrow. Please, please, please show out in force like this for the first standalone global surgery research symposium tomorrow, which is live streamed. And Krista's in the back. Please also let us know how we can do better and get you engaged. Scan that QR code. And let us know for the committee. So,
Great. Thank you so much, and I'll be quick. So Ava from UCSF. So my question is pertaining capacity building in research. I work with a bunch of LMIC health equity fellows. We're very fortunate to have a CHASA fellowship that predominantly invites and sponsors LMIC researchers who are surgeons, who are fellows, who are residents. And when we ask them what they need help with their research methods. Mm-hmm. And so this is specifically actually pertaining to what you had spoken about, Dr. Grayson, about how do you build longitudinal research relationships where high quality work is still a mandatory metric and standard that we hold, but also taking into account that our fellows don't have the luxury of protected time like we do.
Right. Yeah, I think so. The personnel is really the biggest problem, and even a challenge for us because we don't have medical students running around and, who can be have time to spend and invest in this. But I think it's really returning to basics. So in large part with the hospitals that I work with, including the one where I work, it's red cap access and we're not talking clinical trials and things, so AAS has done a research course that's awesome, and we're working on contextualizing that to even bring it back to even more basic or granular, because people come and they're like, I want to do all these big things, and they can't do it. And so I think just really starting at the very beginning would be my first piece of advice, and the second is to give up the credit. Right? You don't need it. You were born in a country in which you have every opportunity, and I just cringe when I read a paper and I see first and last authors were born in North America or Europe. It just makes me cringe. Give up the credit and promote those people that you're working with, and say that from the start. Acknowledge it from the start. I want to work with you so that you have a senior author, a first author publication, and I'm going to mentor you through it. My name will be in there somewhere, but my recognition's not important. Thanks. That's a good question.
Good answer.
great answer. Dr. Emil.
All right, 3 quick points. First of all, Robin, this is one of my proudest moments at APSA. I first met Robin across a baby's bed in Rwanda when she was a resident. If anybody's wondering how promotion happens in global surgery, here's an example. She's gone from a resident to a leader in global surgery in just 10 years. That's a pretty short amount of time.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
It actually isn't that difficult, and congratulations for co-leading this, Robin. Very proud of you. The second point I wanted to make is just about funding, because we talked about grants, we talked about department money. We haven't talked about private donations. And that's something I have to say, if you start to look into it, you'd be surprised how many people are looking for projects to fund. So all our global surgery work in our department at McGill has been private donations. We've raised over $2 million from people who've supported our exchange with Kajabi, which went on for 10 years. Our Jean-Martin Leberge Fellowship, Dr. Botello, a Brazilian surgeon, is our current fellow, and many other projects that we do overseas. So our foundation has actually become our biggest champion, not the hospital and not the department, but the foundation. And they're constantly looking for more projects to fund. There's a huge appetite in the private donor community for that, and I think we need to tap into it. And finally, I'll just make a little plug for Mercy Ships. We have a reception tomorrow at noon. I'm very sorry we're competing with Benji Brooks. It's a horrible competition, but it is another different model, and I hope some of you will take a chance and come to our reception.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for attending,
Thank you.
for the full audience.